Hey guys, welcome to another Theology Thursday. This week's question connects to last week's question about the law of Moses, and that is, are we still under the law of Moses? As Christians, do we still follow the 613 commandments in what we call the law of Moses under the Mosaic covenant? Well, this is a simple question with a complicated answer, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. There are three main perspectives when it comes to answering that question. Group number one is that we are no longer under the law of Moses at all. It has been replaced with the new covenant. The second answer is the middle ground, which says, well, we're under some of it, but not all of it. And the third group, well, on this other end says, yes, we're absolutely still under it. God gave it, and so it must be good. We need to still follow it. Well, the problem with views 2 and 3 is figuring out how do you follow those commands that were given to a specific group of people in a specific period in history to address specific problems when we're not in that period anymore. We're not dealing with those problems like they were. How do you decide which laws to keep and which ones not to keep? And so I take the first view. I believe that the law of Moses served its purpose and that we are no longer under it. We are under the law of grace in the new covenant. And I'll explain kind of what I mean by that, because we need to understand the purpose of the law of Moses. The Mosaic covenant was given to the people of Israel not so that they could stay isolated and huddled for the rest of eternity, where God was just going to keep one single nation and he was going to just throw everybody else to the wolves. No, God wanted everybody to come back into the family, but to do that, he needed one nation that was loyal to him, because all the other nations had gone after other gods. And so as God gives what we call the Mosaic covenant, and with that the law of Moses, the 613 commandments that God gave Moses, they fulfilled three specific purposes. The first thing that the law of Moses did was it gave the nation of Israel a code of conduct. I mean, remember, they had spent generations living in Egypt under the rule of the Egyptian empire. And now that they had been set free and were living as their own people group, eventually becoming their own nation, they needed a code of conduct that was written down and codified. They needed a constitution as a nation, as a people group. And so that's the first thing it did. It gave them a code of conduct that was standard, that was fixed. The second thing it did was it created a buffer for them, that the people of Israel were going to be surrounded by all these other pagan nations. Even after they took the promised land and they, set themselves up as a nation and had their territory, they were still surrounded by nations who were worshiping other gods. And God tells Moses specifically, hey, I'm giving you these commandments to set you apart, to make you holy. Holy means set apart for a purpose, and to protect you from the influence of these other nations. That's why some of the commandments that seem weird to us, like not wearing clothing of mixed fabric, not shaving your beard, not your face, not shaving the sides of your head, not cutting your body for the dead, those were all things that the pagan peoples that surrounded Israel did to worship their other gods. And so he said, hey, don't be influenced by them, because then you'll be led to worship those other gods. But the third thing that the law of Moses did that we don't talk about very often is that the law of Moses gave a pathway for the Messiah to come, that it protected the genealogy that was going to be necessary for the Messiah to come. That you see that the second Adam had to follow through the trail of worshiping God, following God. It had to be a son of God and a son of man. And so the third goal of the law of Moses was to preserve the pathway for Messiah. Because if the Messiah didn't come, if Jesus never came, God in skin, then there would never be an opportunity for us to spend eternity with God after death. After this physical life is over, we would all be condemned to Sheol. And so the whole third purpose was to bring the Messiah so that we could have an eternal relationship with God. Now, did the law of Moses fulfill those three purposes? Did it give the nation of Israel, as a specific people group, a code of conduct as they operated in that period in history? Yes, it did. Did it insulate them from the other nations? Well, when they followed it, right? It served its purpose. Did it preserve the pathway for Messiah? Yes, it did. And so now that it has fulfilled its purpose, we don't need it anymore. Jesus replaced it with something better. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus actually says this very interesting phrase. He says, don't think I've come to abolish the law. He says, I've come to fulfill its purpose. And see, if we don't understand its purpose, we don't understand what Jesus meant by that. Jesus, as the Messiah, fulfilled the purpose of the Mosaic covenant, and now it has been replaced with the new covenant. The Sermon on the Mount paves the way for the Last Supper, where Jesus explains that this wine represents my blood, this wafer, this bread, this matzah represents my body. These things that are new, the new covenant that replaces the old. And so we see very clearly the Apostle Paul in Romans chapters 6 and 7. Now remember, we added chapters and verses about 800 years ago. It wasn't originally meant to be read that way. It was meant to be read as a whole letter. Paul explains that we're no longer under the old law because it is actually what gives sin its power, not because the law is bad, because we are flawed, that we are sinful beings. We were born with that spirit of fear that Granddaddy Adam gave to everybody. That spirit of fear leads us to be selfish and not trust God, and we betray his love and his relationship that he wants with us. So we need a new heart and a new mind. It's interesting, that's actually what all throughout the Old Testament the prophets spoke of. They said there'll be a day where we don't need a law written on stone. We need a law written on our hearts. That's where we get the phrase set in stone from, because this idea that things were written on stone. He said you no longer need a law written in stone. Now God's law will be written in your hearts. We needed a new heart and a new mind. One of my brother and I's favorite bands when we were teenagers was a Christian band called Scarecrow and Tin Man, talking about that need that, like the Scarecrow, we need a new mind. Like the Tin Man, we need a new heart. And the Holy Spirit gives us that. So the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 6 and 7, and the writer of Hebrews, that I believe is the Apostle Paul, we're not 100% sure, writes that the new covenant has actually made the old covenant, the law of Moses, obsolete. And he says it's obsolete, it's fading away. We don't need it anymore. It shows us like a mirror our sin, but it can't save us. So this is why I lean towards the first answer. I believe, based off the teachings of Jesus, the writing of the prophets, and the fulfillment of the law's purpose, that we're no longer under it. We're actually under the law of grace, the new covenant. Jesus said that we should love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, love our neighbor like we love ourselves. And he said these two things fulfill all of the requirements of the law and the prophets. Now, that's simple, but it's not easy, but it's the new covenant. So that's my answer to that question. Maybe that creates more questions for you. And if you've got questions, send them in. You can text me, you can send me a direct message, or you can post them here, and I'd love to try to answer them in another week's Theology Thursday. So thank you guys, and until next time, be blessed.